Today is an interesting news day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Not only do we have ultra rare Pigeon secret lair cards to talk about, but there's also the creation of the brand new PFP Council that's coming to Magic the Gathering as well.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The Magic Historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends, I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for another fun installment of Mega Magic News! We're going to talk about ultra rare Pigeon cards. We're going to talk about the new PFP Council, so let's get to it. Up on the screen, you are going to be looking at two different versions of the same card. We have the original Persistent Petitioners from the third Ravnica block, and we have the ultra rare Pigeon edition of the card. So, taking a look at the original so you can appreciate the contrast, Persistent Petitioners is 1 blue and 1 for a 1/3 human advisor. And it has the following abilities. The original wording says, 1 and tap, target player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Or, tap 4 untapped advisors you control. Target player puts the top 12 cards of their library into their graveyard. And it also says, a deck can have any number of cards named Persistent Petitioners. So, first of all, as you can see, them changing the concept of cards going off of your deck into the keyword mill is a huge step upwards. It really does help to manage the amount of space that ends up getting used on a card overall and allows for things like additional flavor text. So the idea behind the first Persistent Petitioners is supposed to be these like Azorius individuals where they just keep coming back day after day after day making the same requests, and your mind just starts to get numbed from it, where you're like, okay, I get it, and they just kind of like wear you down. And if you can get enough of these petitioners together, then all of a sudden it's just this deluge of oration where they keep droning on, and it just eats away at your mind. Like, that is how the mill concept was transmitted to me flavor-wise, and I very much like that blue got one of these you can play any number of it card, because most of the time when it comes to these, you can have an unlimited number of these in your deck style cards. They're almost always black, and even then, they're almost always rat cards. So I like seeing them push out in other directions with it. Now, when you turn and take a look at the Pigeon variation of the Persistent Petitioners, this is absolutely ridiculous and amazing. One of the things I like about Secret Lair is it allows me to disconnect from my normal expectations of Magic and go into a realm of more insanity. And the idea of Pigeon Men rappers petitioning people is absolute insanity. This artwork is hilarious. You have 3 like gangster rapper pigeons, and it's like, it is obviously modern-ish, but then you've got the boombox on the shoulder as well, which gives it kind of like an old school 80s sort of vibe. So it's modern, but also kind of a throwback from our current time. So modern compared to regular Magic, but a throwback compared to our current era. Like the microphones, the boombox, and everything that's going on here. You take a look at the card, you can see they have replaced, like, just take a look at the first sentence on the card, and you can see that target player mills a card is so much less clunky than target player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Now, obviously, the full extended version is great for noobs who don't really know what mill is, but it's going to take you 4 seconds to understand what mill is. So that's a really big move upwards. And the flavor text on these pigeons is hilarious. It says, we need seeds, yo. Lots of seeds. And ... Now, those of you who pay a lot of attention to what's going on with secret layers and new cards that show up may remember we've actually received multiple special variations of Persistent Petitioners. There was another one that featured robots. So you know what? Let's get all 3 up on the screen together so you can appreciate the array of them. So the robot concept here, this is one where they're like robotic chefs, right? You can see all the cooking implements. I like the way that in this artwork, they are shown kind of almost mimicking the same poses as the original Persistent Petitioners, right? It's just kind of robotic versions of them. But look at the flavor text. The flavor text says cake. The Overmind demands cake. The Overmind also requires that, ... If you take the flavor text of the Pigeon and the robot versions, you can cram them together into a kind of flowing sentence where it says, we need seeds, yo, lots of seeds, and cake. The Overmind demands cake. The Overmind also requires that, and then maybe there's another persistent petitioner that continues on with that. But I like that each one of these cards shows them droning on about what they want to acquire. And each of them seems like they would be annoying. Having a bunch of robots drone on and on about food over and over while they're clanking and ratcheting around would be annoying. But these pigeons are extra annoying. If you really get in deep on the artwork, you'll see these three clowns are standing on a taxi cab. So they're standing on a taxi cab in the middle of a street, like bellowing out their music with a boombox. It's like an impromptu, forced musical performance. So the flavor concept of this card is absolutely amazing, right? I love that. But then there's also the rarity aspect of it as well, because we're looking at a situation where this is the only bird version of persistent petitioners that we've seen. And it looks like this one has come out of the newer wave of secret layers, which means that Wizards of the Coast is really going all out, trying all kinds of different concepts to create rarer stratas of cards, right? So you've got the situation with Kamigawa and Neon Dynasty where you could see they made like 5 different colored versions of the, who was it, Hitasugu or whatever, where they had like, here's the neon orange, here's neon green, here's neon blue, like all these different things, right? And then with the secret layers, we had the Viscera Seers that are numbered 1 to 100. So you have 100 different one of those, right? And there's this big flurry of intensity around those. Is this a situation where these Pigeon secret layer bonus cards are actually rarer? Like they're not numbered, but are there fewer of them? Is Wizards of the Coast going on multiple levels where we're going to put out limited edition numbered cards, but we're also going to put out super limited edition not numbered cards to act as mega chase bonus cards, right? Because we've seen different variations of these levels of bonus cards. Like if you got a Phyrexian secret layer, as far as I understand it, you could have got a Phyrexian Swamp, you could have got a Viscera Seer, or you could have got one of the schematic versions as well in terms of something like a Lightning Greaves or a Rogue's Passage. So it really does feel like they're making all these different tiers of rarity when it comes to these bonus cards. And this is literally the only copy of the Pigeon petitioners that I've heard of. And it really does open the door and make you wonder, how many different variations of these petitioners are they going to make? I do have to admit, it's a smart move from the perspective of a business in terms of you can sell an unlimited amount of these petitioners. If somebody is playing a dedicated petitioner deck, they're going to need 30, maybe 40 of these cards, depending on the plan they're going with. So by creating these like ultra rare editions of them, Wizards is essentially creating like these extra incentives for you to buy the secret layers and more stuff to make its way out into the secondary market as well. It is a pretty wild concept, and I'm curious to see if this Pigeon card will continue to be as rare as it first seems, or if it's actually going to turn out to be a little more common than the Viscera Seer. Part of the problem when it comes to sorting out all the information about these secret layer bonus cards and everything that's going on in that regard is the fact that there's so little information, right? Secret layers are ordered individually by people. You can't really get information from LGSs in terms of how many like boxes and stuff like that are flowing through. So without Wizards specifically telling us how many of each secret layer sold, we don't know how many secret layers made it out into the wild. We don't know how many of them have these particular bonus cards. It's really, really difficult to pull a particular bead on anything and determine the quantities unless they just straight up go ahead and number them like they did with the Viscera Seer. So for me, this is a very interesting card, and I'm curious to see if we're going to develop into having a whole range of like 15, 20 different petitioners, and if all their flavor texts chain together, because I do like that. I like variants when they're done in fun ways like this. I don't like variants where the only difference is like a different colored border. That to me doesn't really like fire up my imagination and excitement. You know what I'm saying? So that covers what we have to talk about in terms of the Pigeon aspect of it. So let us turn now, my friends, over to the PFP Council, which is the Pauper Format Panel Council. Never mind, drop the council part. Clearly that makes absolutely no sense. So it's literally just the PFP, the Pauper Format Panel. And the idea behind this is going to be somewhat similar to the Commander Rules Committee, right? So the idea is that Pauper is a format that is currently underserved in terms of guidance and direction. And if for some reason you're not familiar with the Pauper concept, really Pauper Magic is just this. You can only play with common cards. As long as a card has been printed at common somewhere along the lines, you can use it, unless it's on the banned list for being too strong a common. And some of the stuff that they're printing, like Modern Horizons 2 and things like that, end up being too powerful and get slapped on that list. You have to have banned lists for formats to work. But the problem with Pauper is you end up with it essentially almost being neglected to a degree, where there's not a lot of movement from Wizards of the Coast in terms of doing Pauper bans frequently, because Wizards is basically paying attention to a bunch of different formats, and depending on how valuable those formats are to them, the more attention Wizards is going to pay to them, right? So things like Standard, Modern, Commander, even though that is governed by the Rules Committee, Wizards of the Coast still has influence with them, but either way, these are the formats they're going to care more about. Even Pioneer is probably going to get more attention than Pauper, because Pauper ultimately is one of the things that Wizards of the Coast is going to care the least about, because you're using the least valuable cards, and they put all their chase cards in like the rare and mythic rare slots and stuff, you know what I mean? So while they want to have a couple good commons and sets here and there, so you don't feel like every common and uncommon is garbage, and there's some commons and uncommons that can actually affect Standard, they ultimately make commons pretty weak, and they just kind of ignore Pauper. If Pauper's not functioning that well, who cares? How many booster packs does Pauper sell? You know what I mean? If you're a Pauper player, how many booster packs are you buying to get Pauper cards? None, because you can get commons dirt cheap from people, right? People will just throw you commons. If somebody came to me and was like, hey, I wanted to get into Pauper Magic, can you help me out? I'd be like, hold on. I'd go into my closet, grab out a big box of cards. Here you go, buddy. Knock yourself out. Just don't use any uncommons that are in there. You know what I mean? And they'd be like, oh, thanks, Chief. Like, that's the level of Pauper as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Wizards of the Coast has been concerned. So they're not really keen on spending money overall very much to like work on that format when they can spend their money working on Standard, Commander, all their big money makers. You know, they're over there figuring out stuff like, how do we bring something like Alchemy to Arena, long before they're worried about balancing Pauper. So they are creating the Pauper Format Panel. The majority of people on this panel will be individuals who are right into Pauper, but aren't specifically employees of Wizards of the Coast. It will also include Gavin, right? He's one of the people, obviously, who works over at Wizards of the Coast. I assume you know who he is when I say his name. So he is going to be the go-between, essentially, from the Pauper Format Panel and Wizards of the Coast. So this group of people, you can see the list online. The names, I didn't feel like going through all that, but I think there's 6 to 8 different individuals, and they will make their recommendations. Gavin will take those to Wizards of the Coast, and then they will discuss them back and forth about what should be banned and whatever. I mean, one thing I can say about Pauper, at least, is that because it involves cards that are so essentially worthless, Wizards of the Coast doesn't really care that much what happens with the format. So on one hand, you don't get as much, we're going to ban this, we're going to guide the format. But on the other hand, you also don't have them trying to cram as many cards into your format to get more money as they can, right? Which is a tricky situation when you're dealing with commons. How do you print commons but make them expensive for people? That is a very difficult thing to do. So I think overall, Pauper is just going to benefit from this. I don't really see there being too much of a downside. It just seems like it might speed up problems with Pauper. Ultimately, it is in Wizards' best interest to have Pauper as a healthy format, right? Because the more formats you have to play Magic, the better. And if somebody has a cheaper format, that can be an easier way to wander into Magic. You get into Pauper and you go, you know what, actually, I'd like to try some crazier, beefier cards, and I want to move up in power level. You know, let's kick the training wheels off this and move on up. And I can already hear the Pauper players get, what do you mean training wheels? Pauper is a very good format, and it is not. It's all good, man. If you love Pauper, that's cool. I'm not knocking it. I'm just viewing it from the perspective of Wizards of the Coast, where they're going to look at it and go, yeah, okay. Do you know what I mean? It's like, right, we'll make some changes if you say so. So ultimately, to me, this seems like it's probably just going to be for the good of the game. You got a bunch of people who are invested in Pauper. They're going to actively try and put through these changes. And in most cases, I can't see Wizards of the Coast going, you know what, we don't want to ban that common. It really doesn't feel likely. The only situation I could see where Wizards would try and say, we don't want to ban this common and Pauper, is if it was something that was just, let's say they're doing a master set with a bunch of reprints, and there's some really desirable common in it, and they're just about to ban it. They might be like, you know what, we don't want to ban that right now. Don't tell them, but 6 months from now we can do the ban. Give them some reason of whatever, and let us sell the cards. Because I totally feel like, I mean, it's Wizards of the Coast, let's be real. They got to have some of that going on at the company. We've seen it in the past where they're like, don't do the bans till we make our cheddar, son. Anyways, thanks for coming by. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Big thank you to all of my patrons for supporting my channel, and I will see all of you, my friends, in the next video.